Welcome back to another episode of Sky's the Limit podcast. I'm your host, Mike Doherty, and today we have a special guest, Dana Dunford, who is the CEO of Hemlane, which is a venture-backed property management platform with over 28,000 rentals and $1 billion in payments processed, which is very, very impressive. She's a strong advocate of purchasing properties anywhere in the country, as a lot of times best investments are not typically in our backyards. She supports real estate investors in setting up the most intelligent process to manage rentals from a distance while connecting them with local licensed professionals. What's even more impressive is her track record. In 2018, Dana was actually named one of the top 20 women leaders and influencers, in commercial real estate tech. She previously worked at Apple on their worldwide financial planning and analysis team of Nest, which we all know, and the home technology company that was then acquired by Google for $3.2 billion. So very impressive track record. She received her MBA from Harvard Business School, and we're very lucky to have her on to the show today. So welcome, Dana.
Great. Thanks so much for having me, Michael.
Yeah. So one question I usually start off the episode with is, how did you get started in this wild world of real estate?
Yeah, it's interesting. I wish I was more strategic because back in 2010, I wish I wouldn't have invested it was 2010, invested in some tech companies that didn't do so well. I wish I would have just invested in real estate with the market corrections. So it would be the first thing I would say. And then the second is you always need, I feel like, someone to get you into it to allow you to see the value of like, hey, this is an appreciating asset. And also you get cash flow. And by the way, it may not look like you get a lot off those dividends, but your tenant is actually paying down your mortgage. And so now you're leveraging debt. And no other asset class is as stable and provides all of that for you. So it started with my older sister and her husband. They were invested in real estate, so they got me interested and excited. What didn't get me so excited was I saw all of this opportunity to invest out of state, but I also saw the transitions that we had personally made of multiple property managers, having different property managers, but all using different platforms. So like one on Buildium, one on Appfolio, one on Rent Manager. And it made it really challenging to say, hey, I control my portfolio. Everything's on one platform that I can control. And when I need boots on the ground or I need help, I can get them seamlessly into a platform. And so, in our personal opinion, property management had to change. It had to do a 180. Suddenly, instead of property management software and platforms being something that property managers controlled, we saw a huge opportunity for it to be something that the owner starts with and then builds their team on. And so it's interesting because today there's plenty of property managers who use Hemlane, but they also see the value in that because they can get these more strategic investors who are using Hemlane, controlling and building their team on it. And then we just got rid of all the silly things that traditional property management software had, like trust accounts. It's like, I totally get when you had horses and buggies and someone was carrying rent to one place to the other, you needed to put it in some account. But like we're in the 21st century here. There is no reason why you can't just go ahead and have the rent transferred directly to the owner and you just take your cut. And so there were a lot of things that our firm belief was this is slowing down the industry, not speeding it up. And we don't care if it's how things have always been done. We're always asking why and improving the process just to make it that much faster.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. I think a lot of our listeners are probably used to hearing Buildium or Appfolio as kind of the two, big names in the space. Admittedly, I hadn't heard of Hemlane until, I was introduced to you. And I think there's pros and cons of both Buildium and Appfolio, but I'd really love to dig into what you like or kind of what you liked from both those systems and that you've implemented in Hemlane and kind of how Hemlane can help other real estate investors that's different than Appfolio and Buildium, for example.
Yeah, so I liked that they had both are similar. I'd say Appfolio is better with because they have investment manager. They're better for syndicates, and Appfolio was also better for affordable housing and accounting. That's it. But like I find all these systems to be the same. like all the softwares, I think of it as a red ocean. Like they all provide the same thing. Advertise to all the listing websites, background and credit checks, applications, rent collection, owner reporting. It's like the same thing. It actually gets kind of boring to talk about, but we knew we needed that. And so we were like, okay, fine, we'll just put that into the platform, because anywhere that you can automate, where automation is better than humans, we will do it. But then for us, it was, well, how do you actually change the industry and make it better? For us, some of the faults we saw was with Appfolio and Buildium, you were the repair coordinator. And so every single property manager had to staff their own repair coordination team to troubleshoot on the repair, dispatch service professionals. And our viewpoint was, hey, if you just have one centralized team that's really good at it, understanding exactly what the problem is, going through and troubleshooting, de-escalating, dispatching the service professionals, it's a lot more efficient. I know, like, for example, Appfolio has built that in, but it's a little bit more of a call center of like an admin versus an actual coordinator. And so for us, it was, how do we help solve those problems so that our users don't have to build their own team? We can just provide that plug and play team at a much more affordable cost for them. There's 137,000 property managers out there with an average of 3 employees. And so you can imagine they're trying to haphazardly say, Michael, you do 20% of your time on repair coordination and 40% on your time on tenant move-ins and showings. And I think it's not very well thought out on the property management side of, hey, here's what's better done centralized and here's what's better done with boots on the ground.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. That's really really impressive. So obviously you have Hemlane, which is other investors use it as well as yourself and your family. I'd love to learn or hear about what your rental portfolio looks like today and how you got started buying rentals.
Yeah, great question. So for me, I basically did what any investor would do. I think I had an advantage of family in it, where I got a really freaking good pro forma and went out there and looked at the market rates, and everything changes with the market. And so for me, like before interest rates went up, it was a lot easier to find a property, right? Because everything almost would cash flow. But today it's much more challenging. And so from that perspective, I'm invested in Florida. So I live in San Francisco, California. I'm invested in Florida. Finding rental properties there has become more challenging, but I can still cash flow all of them. There's other markets where you can cash flow, but I have a thesis that, like, hey, I'm going to double down on one area and focus there, just like I think a lot of investors do. If family started in Denver, though, so initially was in Denver, then couldn't find a way to cash flow there, so had to move to Florida. So I think your strategy changes over time. More recently, one of the things I've been looking at is rent by room. That's one that I think is faster growing because you do see that you can get these places to cash flow with slightly more risk with turnover costs and stuff like that. But there's been, I would say for me, always this ample, how do you change your portfolio every single 6 months based on what's happening with the market?
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. So you are a proponent of, and I'm definitely guilty of this. We invest in Connecticut, and I've never invested outside of Connecticut simply for the reason of, like, am I going to find a great property manager to manage this asset that's thousands of miles away? That's scary, and that's scary for a lot of people. But you've found that, maybe through Hemlane and through your systems, that it's really not as scary as some people make it out to be. And if you have the right team and processes and systems, you can invest anywhere. Like there's no boundary.
Exactly. So I think a couple of things with that. One, you have to be realistic. You need a good team, especially like a good handyman on the ground or general contractor, depending on what liability, how much liability you want. And then you need to know that even though you're remote, you need someone there who can just drive by a property at any time if you need to. But for me, like the most recent purchase I had, I've never seen the property. Never went out to it. Don't need to. I actually use self-guided tours to place the tenants in the property.
Perfect.
And I found that was fine, but I also had some sort of qualifications. There is the anxiety if you're not there when it's on market. I think one of the units was on market for 22 days, which gave me some anxiety of like, oh shoot, what's going on? I should have rented it by now. But I met with all the tenants via Zoom. And I just had a 5 minute with them to before I signed the lease. And there was one tenant who came through and he was a total jerk. And so the Zoom call was very short and very much of like, okay, I've got other tenants, their credit score slightly less than yours, but I'm definitely moving forward with them because they call me ma'am and they're very nice to me. And so I think from that perspective, even if you are remote, you can still feel like you're there. Also found it very helpful, like when my turnover crew went in there, we unfortunately had to evict the tenants that were in there for the purchase because they hadn't been paying rent for 6 months with the seller. And so with one of the units, we did a turnover on it, and it was very helpful because I got the videos and everything. So I almost felt like I was there. And so you need a good realtor to know the market and know where to purchase and where not to. And then on top of that, you just need yourself to know, even if you're remote, there's still that emotional connection, even if you are on the other side of the country.
Yeah, no, really good. So where do you see, I guess two questions, where do you see the real estate, property management or asset management industry going in the future, especially with the introduction of AI, which is here? I don't think it's
Mm-hmm.
going anywhere. I'd love to hear your thoughts of, how you think that integrates into maybe the property management systems itself.
Yeah.
And also I'd love to hear about, where you want to go with your personal rental portfolio.
Yeah, great questions. So let me start with just where the property management industry is going. I think it's going to be one of those things where it doesn't happen overnight. Everyone switches over. People are very slow, I think, to change systems. And in real estate in general, technology does not happen overnight. But there will be a time in 5 years where everyone wakes up and is like, oh, whoa, everyone's on the new way of doing property management. And I can get from my fingertip as an owner real time alerts on everything going on with my rentals. Rent goes directly into my bank account, including the late fees. The property manager doesn't hold that. And it's a much better way to manage things. So I think that's kind of where the industry is going. As far as getting there, I think us going to Mars, we're going to colonize Mars. Everyone will be on there and then have a much bigger need to say, how do I manage things remotely? And so getting there is a couple of things. One, it's technology doing most of the work. Two, it's pricing structures and changes of 72% of the industry self-manages. And so it's changing the price structure of software, changing the price structure of tech-enabled services, changing the price structure of boots on the ground to make it where it's a win-win for everyone and more people adopt property management primarily through technology. So there's that. Then I think AI is another important one. AI is not going to replace the humans at this moment because of EQ. So if you think about where computers do very well, it's on anything that has a low EQ, but it even could have high context. So like solving math problems, it does very well on that. Jeopardy, it does very well on that. But when a baby is crying in the background and someone doesn't have heat, AI and having that voice pick that up is not going to happen quite yet. It will in the future, but trying to solve that EQ is going to be really hard. And so for us, when we have any AI we implement into Hemlane, our first question is how much EQ is needed for this position.
Mm.
Then once we figure that out, we say how much context do we have, high or low? How do we give it more context in order to have AI do it? In the future, though, that will change. I think in the future, AI will be able to help with things that have high EQ and help to streamline all of that. The caveat I say is I call BS on majority of AI softwares out there because they don't have enough structured data to actually do anything other than what ChatGPT does. And you need your own structured data. What I mean by that, and the reason why we control everything from repair coordination to lock boxes, like we don't use third parties to do self-guided tours. We do them ourselves, is you need all that context. You need to know exactly what's the serial number of the lockbox. who was the person who was last there, what's their driver's license on file. You need all of this context, and you need to control that in order to make it a really, really strong solution where AI could help replace a lot more of what humans do. And so I think where some of these companies like that Folios and the Billiams is like, even Folio used to not be a closed, but it's becoming, or sorry, open, it's becoming more open. If they're not getting data from those other parties and the right data, it's going to be really hard for them to implement really strong AI. And that's where I think Hemlane will be at the forefront of
Wow, that's so crazy. It's so interesting to talk about.
it.
I'm generally curious, where does AI fit into Hemlane right now? Like, I think you mentioned you have some sort of AI in it. Obviously, it's not all AI, but
Yeah.
can you give me a real life example? Let's say of like where AI fits in. Maybe it's, a tenant has a repair request,
Yeah.
and then it comes into your system, and then AI kind of takes over and automatically calls your handyman that's boots on the ground. Just for example, I don't,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I'll give you three examples. I'll start with the repair coordination one. It's troubleshooting repair requests. So our AI will close 7% of requests before they even get to human because the tenant had to flip a breaker or do something else. And so that's where, like on the repair side, there's plenty more places where we use AI, but that's one example. Property listing descriptions is an easy one where we use AI to put those together. The problem is if you look at all of our competitors that do it, there's always fair housing violations. So what you will see is they always seem to have some sort of great family neighborhood or something like that in there. And that's where the AI needs your context to really make sure that it works well. And then other ones are phone calls. To your point, you have an example of a phone call. A phone call with a handyman is not a good use of AI. The only reason you are calling that handyman is because they didn't accept the work order in the system, and you need high EQ to say, Michael, you're a handyman. I know you've got 5 other jobs. Here's why you should do my job first. You need that sort of relationship building. And so it's hard to use AI at this moment to do what you would need with a handyman. However, we use AI like when a tenant first inquires about a property, we will automatically use AI to call them and get that showing scheduled for them right off the bat. And so that will be immediate within 5 minutes of them on Zillow or Zumper or HotPads or Redfin looking at it to try to streamline that. That doesn't require as much EQ. And so again, you need to look at the EQ, you need to listen to the current calls and say, could AI solve this? And I think too often people look at AI as hot. How do I find a problem to solve? Rather than saying, I have a problem. How do I solve it? Is AI the best approach or should I use a different one?
Another world out there. That's so cool. That's wild. I feel like so antiquated as far as knowing what AI is capable of and where it'll be in the future, and I'm all about it. I think it's here to stay for sure. I don't think it'll replace, to your point, some sort of human interactions here and there, but yeah, I definitely think it's the wave of the future, and that's amazing how you've already integrated into Hemlane. So how long ago did you create Hemlane, and kind of what's your goal with it going forward? Do you want to make it the number one, property management software tool going forward and outpace Buildium and Appfolio? Like what's your goal with it?
Well, that's a given, Michael. That will definitely happen. No, I think so. As far as the start of Hemley, we started with our first company. My co-founder and I started was applications and background and credit checks, and that was back in 2015, right at kind of the impetus of software for landlords, DIY, et cetera. Then in 2018, we went to market with Hemlane to say, no, we're going to build it all and not just do that, but complete the whole solution for real estate investors and landlords out there. And so there's that. I think when you kind of look at the future and where things are going, I think being the industry standard is obviously a given and where we're going. I think the bigger thing is changing the world. And so when you think about what you can do, it's not a success to just say everyone's on Hemlane. It's more of a success to say real estate, we've changed the game of real estate. more people are excited to get into this asset class. It's easier to manage this asset class, and people don't use property management as a reason to have a barrier to where they invest or why they invest. That, I think, actually changing how people think about real estate is, in my opinion, even more important.
Yeah, so good. So now let me ask you, how many, for me, I had a number of properties I needed to acquire, wanted to acquire before I thought it was worthwhile to have a property management software tool.
Yeah.
Can someone with one 4 unit building, is it worth it to have Hemlane, or like what's the pricing look like for
Yeah.
all the listeners out there if they want to go Google Hemlane after the podcast?
Yeah.
I'm just curious to see what that looks like.
Yeah, we even have a free plan. So
Oh,
we have a
cool,
free
awesome.
plan. We also have as low as $30 a month for more comprehensive for a landlord. There is no reason if you own one rental property that you shouldn't be on Hemlane. It's going to save you time, but more importantly, risk. And risk is where your cash flow depletes overnight. Bad tenants, legal problems, all the kind of shit that you have to deal with of
Yeah.
owning real estate. It's almost a no-brainer, and it seems silly when someone's like, oh, I can't pay $30 for my rental. I'm like, how valuable is this asset? And what is that as a percentage of the asset or of the rent? Even of the rent, it's just a no brainer. And so for us, I think democratizing it and making it
Hmm.
available to everyone was super important.
Yeah, no, it's really good. And also, I think it would be a lot easier for all the listeners out there if you only have 1 to 2 properties. Get on, Hemlane now, learn the systems, and then as you grow, it becomes easier and easier rather than having, a portfolio of 20 different buildings and trying to, switch it all over afterwards. I think grow with the right platform to begin with. So, no,
Exactly.
that's really important. I have one question I ask all listeners.
Yeah.
I'm just genuinely curious. What does your day to day look like? Like, walk me through the time you wake up to the time you go to bed. The general like business day. What does that look like for you?
Um, every day is slightly different, but still with the same structure. I am not a morning workout person, but I work
Okay.
out every day.
Yeah.
So usually I get up, and usually I'm up at 6 or 6:30 a.m. I'm not a morning person, so 6:30 and
That's
6
pretty
is
early for
fine.
for not a morning
I'm
person.
I'm not a like 5 a.m. or like 4 a.m. like
Yeah.
Tim Cook type. And then usually it's a shower or get ready and get out the door to work. I always listen to podcasts anytime I'm walking or running or doing anything. I'm listening to some book on tape or a podcast because I'm always wanting to learn during
Hmm.
that time. So I cut out music from like my workout routine or anything like that because I'd rather learn. And then once I'm on the Muni in San Francisco right now. In our Calgary office, but usually I'm on the Muni in San Francisco, and I shoot through all my emails. So I usually have about 120 emails. My inbox is clear by the time I go to bed. And then I usually have about 120 emails. So my goal is by the time I get into the office, I've unsubscribed from anything that is not worth my time. So I just cleaned that up. And then I get through everything else. By the time I'm at my desk, I usually have a meeting starting that's at 8 or 8:30 a.m. I'm straight through back to back in meetings, usually all day until usually 5 or 6 p.m. Then I will go ahead and get back on the Muni, which is different because I used to stay in the office till 10 p.m. Now I get back on the Muni. I clear through my email inbox again, shoot things off to the right people. Then I have family time from 7 to when the kids go to bed at 8:30. And then I'm back on to this time, like from 8:30 onward, it's more strategy stuff. So it's planning the next day and then making sure again my inbox is clear before I go to bed. Um, and then to answer your question on workout, it's usually right between getting off work and then dinner that I'll work out because again, I'm not a morning person.
Wow. Busy, busy, busy. Good for you. That's amazing. Well, obviously you have a lot of success building Hemlane. I mean, I've started looking into it before our call, and I'm definitely going to dig further into it for at least our portfolio here. I think it could
Yeah.
be, night and day different for what we use now. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you for hopping on this call. Thank you, all the listeners tuning in. Dana, I really appreciate it. I know you're busy, so I'll let you hop, but let's stay connected, and I'm definitely going to dig further into Hemlane. So thank you again.
Would love it. Thanks so much,
All right,
Michael, for
see ya.
having
Bye.
me.
Thank you for watching Sky's the Limit. We're always releasing new real estate content, so if there's something you want to hear, be sure to leave a comment. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel.